Welcome to the Over the Hump podcast. Your gateway to the world of the iconic Brahman breed of cattle. At BRC Ranch, our passion for Brahman cattle runs deep. Join us as we delve into the heart of this extraordinary breed, unveiling its rich history, exploring industry trends, and sharing captivating stories that define the American Brahman. BRC Ranch stands as the pinnacle of Brahman excellence in America, boasting a decade-long legacy of champions and housing the finest Brahman bulls worldwide. It's not just about cattle, it's about a legacy that reverberates across ranches and hearts. Brought to you by BRC Ranch, where the Brahman legacy thrives and stories are woven into the very fabric of ranching. This is Over the Hump. And now your hosts, Brendan Cutrer, Rachel Cutrer, and Keaton Dodd.
Welcome to Over the Hump. I'm Rachel Cutrer, today's host, and in this episode, I'm so honored to get to interview my fellow colleague at BRC, Harley Wade. Many of you know Harley as the man who shows all the champions for BRC, but you might be surprised to know that he didn't start showing Brahman cattle until he was in high school. He truly is one of the most talented stockmen I've ever known, and I know you're going to love hearing about his background, how he migrated from Florida to Texas, his thoughts on feeding and showmanship, and much, much more. Get ready to hear from Harley Wade, herdsman of BRC, in this episode of Over the Hump. Welcome to the Over the Hump podcast, where we discuss all things Brahman cattle. And today we have a really special guest with us, Harley Wade, who is the BRC herdsman and has been the BRC herdsman since the beginning, since 2019. And during this time, Harley has really just built his reputation as one of the world's leading authorities on Brahman feeding, herdsmanship, showing. And so today we're going to hear his story, which I know is going to be an inspiration to so many, especially to our young listeners. So welcome, Harley.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm really excited about, getting to do this and kind of share my story and how I started and, kind of how I went from not having any cattle to knowledge to, being a mentor to a lot of youth people, mainly in the Brahman breed now. So I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, well, I would say, that's where I want to start. I want to start with answer the question of how did Harley Wade get to be the top Brahman herdsman?
So my experience in the cattle industry all began when I was a sophomore in high school. So I had up to that point, zero experience with cattle other than just pointing at cows while driving down the street as a kid and saying, oh, look, there's cows. It all started in sophomore year when I was approached to possibly show our chapter heifer. And at that point, I thought it was a extremely funny thing to do was, walk cows around on a halter. I didn't understand the concept of it at all. And, looking back, that was kind of something I just was like, why not? And at this point, I was in Florida. That was the first year I'd been to Florida. And growing up, kind of background-wise, I grew up rural Tennessee and, grew up on a farm. We raised chickens and all that just on a small scale. I used to sell eggs at the top of the driveway kind of thing. And so when I moved to Florida, I was one of the few kids in my ag class that wasn't scared to get dirt on his shoes and wasn't showing up to class in, white Vans and white Nikes and all of that. And so I was somebody that kind of stuck out, I guess, to my ag teachers and kind of went for it and started showing this heifer. And I actually found out at our county fair that first year that I had been feeding her the wrong feed all year. So that kind of goes to show how far I've come in the industry. But I actually ended up winning Supreme Champion at our county fair with this chapter heifer, and that's kind of what got the ball rolling. So then the following year after that, I got involved in steers, and these were, all haired cattle over there on the central part of Florida, right south of Tampa. And doing that for a couple of years, you were spending hours and hours and hours trying to get hair to grow when it's 90 degrees on Christmas Day and that kind of stuff. And then I actually went to a show in Venus, Florida, which is where Moreno Ranch's headquarters was at the time, and went to Kelvin Moreno's show at the Heartland Classic, showing my haired calves. And then that's kind of where my introduction into the Brahman breed began, was through Kelvin.
Yeah. So what year approximately would this have been?
So that would have been, I think, December of, say, my junior year is when that would have been. So, I was already starting to approach, graduation by the time I got into Brahmins. And so I hadn't been in just a whole lot of time before I was in college and got out of high school showing.
Yeah. So then when did you get your first Brahmin to show?
So it would have happened, I guess, right before that first deadline date for like All American and stuff. It would have been, I think back then it was like May 20th was the deadline date. So it would have been like April or May of my junior year of high school. So I was 17 at that point, and I had a polled gray bull that, he was fine. I don't think I ever placed higher than like third with him. And then I had a little gray heifer as well. And, once again, they weren't the most competitive animals in the world, but it was something that got my foot in the door. And at that point, I was probably the worst showman at the time as well. And so it was really about me just trying to gain experience at that point. So that's kind of how it all got started with the Brahmins.
So when we met, you were serving on the AJBA board. Which meant you would have been elected by your peers in Florida. What age did you get elected to that?
So I was already in college at that point. So I was in my freshman year of college, and I actually got appointed to it because something happened with one of the directors at the time, and they had to step down. And so I got appointed to it and kind of took over a role in that area, and really enjoyed that. Wasn't in it a whole lot of time. I think I served the national show, Houston, and then that following All American. And that was also a very interesting time as well. It was two of our judges canceled on us during All American, and so it was the day before the show, and we were up till 1:00 in the morning trying to find judges that year. And so it was definitely an experience I won't forget.
Yeah, leadership experience. So we first met you at Dallas in 2018, which would have been the year, like, Sweetie was the champion that year. And the way we met is, I mean, you know this, but I'm just sharing it for our listeners. We were needing some extra help in the group classes, and Colton Thigpen was like, hey, I know this really, really good showman from Florida. And you jumped in and helped us in the group class, and that's really the first way we met. Do you remember who you showed?
Yeah, that was 160 over 8.
Oh, okay. So it would have been like maybe either his first year or maybe his second national show?
No, that would have been his first national show, I believe.
Okay. So how did you and Colton meet?
So Colton judged a show over in Okeechobee, and I had a red female. Her number was 80 over 1. And Colton actually selected her as grand champion. And when he was talking reasons on her, he said, "Ooh, this one just makes my heart sing." And then he sang I forget what song it was, but he sang like one line out of this song and then selected her champion. And so that was really my first experience with Colton. And then I kind of followed along with things that he did after that, because he was super personable at the show. and
Mhm.
was, gave out tons of advice to the kids and all of that. And of course, at that time, being so new as I was to everything, like I was still kind of searching for like mentors in the industry. And
Mhm.
like I had had a couple of people when I was doing haired cattle that, assisted me here and there. But now in the Brahman industry, I was looking for somebody that, really was making a big impact, not just on the breed, but also with kids of the youth. And Colton was a tremendous person for that.
Mhm. So that would have been in October. And just aligning things with like the BRC timeline, Brandon and I were looking for an intern to help us with our particular show cattle at that time. And I believe that's when we talked to you, that time frame between like fall and winter, right? Because you moved to Texas in January 2019. Is that
Hmm.
right?
That's right. So I think it was
Okay.
like December. You had sent me a message about an internship, and uh, that I was, I'd wanted to go to college out in Texas, and my mom decided it was probably best if I stayed in Florida. Which, looking back, she probably wasn't wrong. But that was kind of my ticket to come out to Texas, and uh, kind of led me all here. So
Yeah.
in
So then in September 2019 is when we started BRC. And we obviously offered you the job to be our herdsman, but you also had some other possible job opportunities. You know, you had some different options that you could consider around that time frame. Tell us, but you chose to us. You know, you chose to come to us, and really at that time, BRC was nothing, and that was a big risk. That you took, I think. So, what was going through your head when you made that decision?
There was a lot. I mean, that whole time frame, I mean, it was like things were moving fast, but then so slow and all of that. But really, what ultimately led to my decision would, be the, leadership that you and Brandon both offered, and the relationship that we had built between me moving out here in January and then September. Uh, I was, my closest relative at the time was 1,300 miles away, in a 17-hour drive. And so I think that relationship that we had kind of built between January and September, and, just a little bit of loyalty. Like I remember when you reached out to me in December, how excited I was. And then, that moment kind of happened. And part of me felt like that was my way of trying to pay y'all back in a sense. Like y'all believed in me and reached out to me, and now it was my turn to do the same. It was my turn to, believe in you and Brandon, and uh, see what kind of adventure and what we could do. And, we're going on 5 years now, and it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life.
Well, I mean, we're definitely a team here. We've been through everything, start to finish. So one, just looking at the last 5 years of your life, to me, one of the moments that really stands out is the day you had told us you were taking Caitlin on a date, and we knew Caitlin from showing Brahmins, but we didn't know her very well, and so and she just has been she's just an amazing young lady, and I feel like when you and Caitlin got together, it just took y'all, both of y'all's personal lives to the next level. And now y'all have a wonderful family. But share with us kind of that story too.
So I met Caitlin for the first time actually in Georgia, at the All American when it was in Perry, and I believe that was in 2019, and that July I believe is when it was. And I didn't even really meet her. I actually met her mom. So her mom was sitting in the stands, and for some reason I just went up and started talking to her mom. And Caitlin's dog was over there, and I was petting on her and all that. And then I walked away, and Kate walks up to her mom, and she's like, "Who was that?" And her mom responded back with, "A man that you need to marry."
Oh,
And then, that was 2 or 3 years before Kate and I ever went on a date. And then I moved out to Texas, January of 19. And so it was 18 Imperial is when it was. All American was 18. So then when I moved out to Texas, I had no idea that Caitlin had even lived in this area. And I actually met her in HEB, over in, I think the meats section is where it was, in the fajitas. And I asked her out on a date, and it ended up not going anywhere. So about a year and a half, 2 years go by, and about 3 or 4 opportunities, where I ran into her, came by, and I had asked her on dates and didn't turn into anything. And then finally I sat there, and a mutual friend was like, "Hey, you should text Kate." And I was like, "Well, I've tried. I don't think she's interested." Because I was starting to hit the point where I think I was a little burnout, little butt hurt maybe, because I'd been stood up on a couple of dates at this point. And she finally said yes, she'd go on a date with me, and that's kind of been that. She's been there every step of the way, and some days I feel bad for her. I come home in a bad mood a couple of times, but she puts up with me, and she's a big part of the drive that I have to be so successful and all of that. So she's definitely a really big part of my life.
Oh, absolutely. When you had first moved here, remember you came with us to church at the Church of Christ a few times. Remember, I was like, "You're such a good singer. Do you know music?" You're like, "No." But when you and Kate got together, you really got serious about your relationship with God and your faith, and then just seeing the life that you two have built. It's so evident that your leadership skills and your high ethics, your morals, I mean, all of that, I think it's rooted just in the decisions that you've made, and then also just the great relationship y'all have of just being people of high character and high morals, and just always working to be good people and help others. It's amazing.
Yeah, Kate, she my relationship and God and faith and all of that hasn't always been something I was proud of. It was, there was times where I questioned it, and I struggled and asked God why and that kind of stuff. And Kate, she's Catholic, and she told me, I think 2 months into us dating, she was like, Catholic couples, if they're both Catholic, that the chances of the relationship being healthy and good and all of that are much stronger. And I started going to church with her every Sunday. And I mean, every Sunday. She is by the book to the T. 9 a.m. Mass, we are there. And
Yes.
so I was like, all right. And I ended up doing RCIA classes, and which is the Catholic version of basically Bible school, and kind of an introduction into what being a Catholic is. And I was driving to East Bernard after work twice a week, going to these classes, and then a third time a week, going to church on Sundays, and then ended up converting, I guess, 2 Easters ago now. And so I think, Kate's push to have a good relationship with God and be strong in our faith, it's been something that has probably enabled me to keep a more positive attitude, just kind of in day-to-day stuff, despite picture pin stuff.
The picture pin.
Yeah, picture pin stuff there.
Yes.
That's like a quarter of my confession right there, is picture pin stuff. So,
oh my God.
But anyway, she's been a huge, building block in my life, and kind of the backbone to what I do in day-to-day things.
Yeah, it's great. Let's move into talking a little bit about some of the specifics of being a herdsman. So I'm going to brag on you a little bit. The person that just started showing when they were a junior in high school. So over the last 2 years, you have exhibited the last two national champion bulls. And then when you look back at the last three Houstons, you exhibited the Houston champion in 2023. And then we didn't show in 2022 because Brandon judged. And then you had the Houston champion in 2021. And so we have had a really amazing run, but that is very largely due to you. But what are some of the animals that stick out in your mind as some of your favorites?
As far as success goes in a show animal, I would have to go, like, as my favorite to like look at was probably 805.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, so she was probably my favorite as far as looking at goes. Mm-hmm. Now, my favorite story of one would probably be Hey Dude, just because he had a really interesting.
Oh my gosh! Yes, you gotta tell it. Tell it. Go tell it.
Just he was born at Lynn and Bubba Huff's house as he was just an AI calf out of the cow 37 over 8, I believe, and then he ends up coming to the show barn. And I started halter breaking him for a couple of weeks. And then we decided, he's not going to be big enough or good enough. And so we turned him out at the bull development. And then it was like a year later that we decided that we were going to put together just a small offering. I think it was 3 lots of high quality bulls. And it was like Hey Dude, Aggie, and Stockman.
Yeah.
And trying to picture Hey Dude, Brandon was like, you think he remembers the halter? And I was like, I don't know. I really didn't even get that far on him. And so we spent 2 days of Hey Dude just going around and around and around in circles on the halter trying to get a picture of him. And so we eventually, I think that was in November maybe.
Yeah, the pictures would have been the sale was I think in December, so the pictures probably would have been November.
Yeah, so after November, we brought that bull back up into the show barn and started feeding him. And then me, Lynn, and Keaton went on a, trip to Belton and Oklahoma City. And OKC was actually that first bull's time to ever win anything. And he was reserve division under Mitch Thomas, who was the judge when Hey Dude was national champion.
Oh, I want to stop you for a minute because you left out a really important part that really the way I remember it is that it was you who was advocating to keep Hey Dude in the show barn. After he had been in the barn, then got sent to bull development and then came back, because I remember you telling me like, hey, we've got this really awesome bull that just came back from bull development. Yeah. Was that right?
It was either that way or Brandon's way. And it was because it was like Brandon, Keaton, and myself kind of went back and forth on, like, we knew he was always a good bull, but our biggest thing was he going to be big enough? And then I think that's kind of when I was like, well, we're trying to do this new approach of like moderating these Brahman cattle, but then keeping the muscle, keeping the structure abilities and all of that, keeping the quality. And I was like, I think this bull is a good example of that. And yeah, that bull ended up having a tremendous show career, being national champion. He was a division champion at Houston. He was a division champion his last year at nationals, and had his first calf a couple of months ago off of an old show heifer, Sugar. And so I think that bull, he's got a really bright future.
Yes, I remember when we took that bull to Oklahoma City, because that was when Brandon was not going to any shows prior to him judging Houston. He didn't want to like see anything, but you said, okay, I'm going to take this bull. We're going to give him a shot. And he did not act good, remember? No. And I think Mitch said on the microphone, did the bull get reserve division?
Yeah, so he was reserve division, and Mitch said, if this bull had sat still and given me a better look, then he probably would have been my division champion. And then when I realized Mitch was going to be judge at the national shows, and I think it was, I guess it would have been that November as well. It was, a 4-month process, and that just, it burned in my head over and over again. And I was like, I've got to get this bull to sit still at nationals.
Mm-hmm.
And so I finished my day every day by catching him, sticking him for, it was like 2 or 3 minutes. If he walked
Mm-hmm.
out and then walked straight into it, I was like, all right, I'm happy with that bull. And I put him back up and let him eat. And so,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that bull, he was just a really cool story. And I think he's got a lot to offer in the future as far as his offspring go.
Oh, yeah. I think it would be fun, just for fun, if I say some names of our show cattle and then you rank them on like a scale of 1 to 10 of how much you love or don't love them.
1 being I love them the most, or
Because,
10
no, I would say 1 being
the
like, I
least?
don't love, the
Okay.
least. Okay, so Glitter Sparkle.
Oh, 10. Super easy to handle. International champion. 10 out of 10.
Boombox.
He would have been an 8 out of 10 until his last national show. I got to bump him down to about a 4 because that last national show, he was feisty. He got pretty
Yes.
mean at that last national show.
Dutton.
9 out of 10. Reserve
9 out of 10.
Yeah, reserve national champion. Didn't always like getting his nosebleed put in. He was but other than that, he was, real easy to handle, and he kind of has a similar story to Hey Dude as far as he didn't come into the show barn until he was probably 11 months old as well.
Well, we forget this a lot, but when he was the reserve national champion that year at Rosenberg, that was his very first show.
Yep, that was his first show, and that was, I think that was our first show as BRC, unless we went to Washington County, maybe, which I don't think we did. But yeah, I think Nationals was our first show that year at 19.
160.
Oh, that bull kicked me so many times in the bed. And it's not like he was kicking trying to kill you. He was just kicking because he could. And I think honestly he thought it was funny because his last year at Houston, he got me twice, and I made the mistake of going to the med tent at Houston and be like, oh, can I get a bag of ice? And they don't make it that simple. You can't just grab a bag of ice. They have to evaluate you. And it was like a 30-minute process, all because this bull kicked me in my knee.
Oh my gosh.
So,
I'm pretty sure the last time we brought him up to take a picture, he kicked somebody, maybe Keaton.
Yeah, I think, it was Keaton. The last time we tried to picture him, he kicked Keaton.
Oh my gosh. Who am I missing? I would say those are some of like our top 5. I mean, we've had so many good ones.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, it's been good. So walk us through let's talk about a day in the life of a herdsman. Like, so to walk us through a normal day in the life, just a normal day at the show barn.
So it usually just, starts out, I'll grab a few bales of hay from the barn at my house and, drive up, unload that, go through feedings, check the animals, animal health, all that, make sure everything's good, clean pens, sip on some coffee, work on catching everything, weather permitting, wash them, put them on the tie rail, and then when we're in halter breaking season and stuff like that, like we get some groups of halter breaking calves in, majority of my focus goes to that because days are pounds, and the more days that I'm halter breaking them, the heavier they are. So
days are pounds is an excellent quote. I should make that into like a graphic and put your name under it. Because your feeding, your concentration on feeding and like individual attention is just really second to none. And maybe tell us about that, your thoughts on feeding and management and stuff like that.
So
don't give away any secrets.
Yeah. No, I really where I start is just a high quality feed. I mean, if you come into our barn June and our next show isn't until August at the kickoff, you're not going to see any supplements in the barn. I mean, we're strictly feeding our feed. And that was a feed that myself and EB Milling came up with. And we found something that was, worked for us. And I'd say 5 years in, it's given us good results. And so, we're sticking with that. And but then as far as anything else, if we get 60 days to 45 days out, that's when I might start incorporating some beet pulp, or, maybe you cook corn for an older bull or something that could use just a little more of an edge or a cover on them. We don't use anything secret. We don't sprinkle any powder on there. If anything, I might just sit there and put a little love on it. But I mean, there's no secret powder that we put on there to bulk the calves up or anything like that.
Yeah, it's and another observation that I just have is like the individual attention, and you don't push the cattle, like 365 days a year. You feed with the intention of that, yes, they need to be in show quality, but they also need to be in a body condition where they can get bred, and or the bulls could easily go into the bull stud and start producing semen. So your approach is more of like a practical body condition, definitely not super fat. And I think that really works well for us to keep the cattle in such a natural, almost working condition.
Yeah, I think it ends up working out really well for us, especially when they're 3 years old and getting turned out, and they are already in more of an optimal shape, and your cows have already raised a calf, and they're, most of the time they're bred back already. Our 3-year-olds at that point, and our bulls are collecting. Now, sometimes it doesn't always work out like that, but as far as individual attention goes on everything, I just take it in kind of a simplistic approach, I would say. Just looking at them in a standpoint of ease them into it instead of pushing. And when you kind of go with that approach, I mean, you're saving money at the same time.
Yes.
When you're not pushing cattle 365 days, and you'll get more longevity and production out of them.
If you love listening to Over the Hump, just imagine how great it would be to visit BRC Ranch and see firsthand the remarkable animals you hear about on this podcast. BRC Ranch is located in Bowling, Texas, just an hour south of Houston. We love to provide complimentary ranch visits to anyone interested in adding BRC genetics to their ranching operations. Come see the legends and champions of the Brahman breed, and let's talk about how Brahman cattle can go to work in your ranch. Visit brcranch.com and let's plan your visit to the ranch.
Yes, you are definitely very frugal in everything that you do. We appreciate that. But we talked about a day in the life at a show, at a home. Walk us through a day in the life at a show.
Shows are definitely a little bit longer days. A lot of the times Houston, we're showing up at the barn at 2:30, getting there. Me and Lynn will throw our wash boots on, and we'll head to the wash rack. And if I'm not in the wash rack, I'm extremely picky and OCD about the beds. I like to have them at a certain elevation and slant and slope and all of that. And so I'll kind of run back and forth and look at the beds. But, we'll have a show string of 25 to 30 at Houston, and we're done washing by probably 4 o'clock, and we'll leave them tied up, drying off. We'll sheen them, brush them down, all of that. Be done with that about 5. Tie them down about 6, and that's kind of when you start seeing other people roll in the barn, and we're already sitting down eating breakfast.
Yeah, you're referring to 4, 5, and 6 a.m. just to make sure.
a.m. Yeah, a.m. So, yeah, we're going from 2:30 a.m. and then we'll start feeding. I like to start feeding about probably 7-ish in the morning, and then we'll go through and depending on the day, if it's show day, we'll try to keep everything pretty relaxed. But when we've got a bunch of international guests, those cattle are getting up and down a lot. So we'll try to run people on brushes and keep shavings off the cattle and looking nice and presentable, and then just kind of follow the day out, and we'll feed about 4-5 o'clock and go grab some dinner, and then we're back at the barn probably 8:30, 9 o'clock, watering and putting out hay again. It's just kind of a continuous process, and then we finish up and we're back in the beds probably 9:45, 10 o'clock. So by the end of the week, all the guys are real tired, but I like to think that we put the most effort, and the results sometimes come out of that. So we enjoy it.
Tell our listeners kind of your approach to halter breaking, because you halter break a lot of cattle each year. And what's your game plan on that? Have you found that certain bloodlines are easier to halter break? Do you think genetics play a factor in that?
Genetics play a huge part in that. 835 over 7 Lupita. Probably my favorite cow ever. Love her. The way she produces stuff. However, every single calf that comes into the barn out of her, I know she's going to kick. 160.
We should
160 was an 835.
Yes.
We've got a new bull in the barn, 322. 126, 230. Those last two were her last two natural calves that were champion natural produce at Houston. Both of those, you have to keep an eye out on them because they'll kick you. But yeah, as far as my approach during halter breaking goes, I just bring them into the barn, let them settle in, get comfortable, walk around through them. Kind of just get them used to a little bit of human interaction, ease them into show feed, throw some halters on them on a Friday, let them drag a rope through the weekend, and then come Monday, it's game on. I'm tying them up and brushing them off, and just really getting in there, I suppose. It's not always pretty. It's the first week's always the hardest, I would say. It's the week where me and Ty go home really sore.
Or when we go look at the security cameras and rewind it and look at stuff and laugh.
Yes, there's quite a few moments on there. There's a new one from today that I will have to send you after we get off of this. But it's it's always something, and as long as there's not bones sticking out, most of the time we're just the guys at the barn are just laughing, and we're like, oh man, that sucks, and then we just we get back at it, and it's I've been halter breaking calves now, I guess 8 years, which isn't that long, but I'm still learning new things and new techniques and things that can improve the way I do things.
So do you have like a time frame? I mean, we know some are more gentler, some are less gentle. That's such a nice way for me to put that, less gentle. But, do you have a time frame where you just, not saying give up, but just almost give up and be like, look, this one's not going to get halter broke?
Maybe 6 weeks.
Okay.
6 weeks. At that point, you're probably pretty close to wanting to pull your hair out or pull the calf's hair out, and 6 weeks, I would probably say, and that's 6 weeks, full on at it, tying them up, trying to walk them. I'm not talking like 6 weeks in the barn. Sometimes we'll have calves in the barn 2 weeks before I have the time to get to them and really start working with them. And so I won't count those first 2 weeks, but I would say 6 weeks full on at it, 2 months at the most, where it's just kind of like, all right, well, I don't think this is going to happen. I don't, I can't guarantee you're going to be a champion one day. I don't think I can invest this much more money into you. Yeah. And then it also depends on just how bad they are. If you have one that's so bad where they're putting, the safety of you and others in the way and the safety of the calf, then sometimes those just aren't even meant to be halter broke. It's just like, all right, you're a nice cow. Go do that in 100 acres of grass.
Yeah. I mean, and there are some we've all shown them that they can be challenging, and that. I mean, you still stick with them and you keep showing them, but you honestly know every time you go in the ring, like, you've got to be on your toes, or you've got to just be paying attention, because even the ones that have been to shows for 3 years, like Boombox, we showed him for 3 years as a puppy dog. And then that very last show, for whatever reason, he freaked out, and you just never know, honestly.
Yeah, you don't. And it's kind of just reading, I guess, the body language of the calves. And, that bull started acting up from when we started washing him that morning. And I kind of figured things were going to be interesting. And then I think Lynn was the one that was putting the show halter on. And then I had to come over and help. And then Keaton was trying to scratch on him. And then Brandon was over there. And, next thing you know, we had 6 guys over there just trying to get the show halter on Boombox that day. And, sometimes they'll tell you, like, hey, I'm about to give you a run for your money. And most of the time they will, especially when they're as big as Boombox is.
Yeah. So for our listeners that don't know, it would have been the national show in 2022. When on the morning of show day, we had got out there and Boombox he was not himself. Like, to this day, I still don't know if somebody messed with him or what, or something spooked him, but he was stirred up. And normally he's very, very gentle. And I had not got out to the barn yet that morning, and Brandon had called me, and he was like, man, something's wrong with Boombox. He's freaked out. And so I was like, oh, well, just wait till I get there, because I scratch him every day and he loves me and he'll be fine. I'll just go over there and scratch him. Stupidly, I guess. And when I did get there, I kind of went up to him and I was just going to like pet him, and he like nearly ran me into the fence. So much for that, And I guess
we lost a coffee pot that day.
Well, yeah. So we were stalled right by the ring. It was there in Shreveport with that small ring. I mean, the stands were right there. And I think the judge saw the whole thing, him kind of trying to tear down the fence and everything. And so then we were going through our head. We were really asking ourselves, like, are we going to be able to show this bull? And he looked amazing. He looked probably the best he's ever looked. And, we're like, well, we haven't brought this bull this far in 3 years to leave him in the bed. So then Brandon said, well, I'm going to show him. I'll show him then because, I'm the oldest guy, I guess is what he was thinking. He was like the oldest man on the show string. And he's like, well, I'm going to show him. And then I think you and I talked about it, and we were like, well, Boombox, he really knows Harley. That's his partner. You're his partner. So you decided to take him in. Do you want to continue the story?
Yeah, so at that point, before we'd even gotten in the ring, we knew we couldn't touch him with the show stick. And I still opted to, carry it in there with me just to look the part, I suppose, and end up showing this bull without the show stick at all, hadn't scratched him. And as I'm going to bring him around, he stops, and one of the ring help goes to try and twist his tail, and I was like, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
And I forget what happened, but I ended up losing the show stick at one point, and so then I'm just walking around with the bull, and I think I got him stuck pretty decent. He was probably a little too scissored on square, but on profile, he got there pretty good, and he ended up winning, I think, reserve division.
He won the class, and that was a really tough class. I mean, there was two or three, four bulls in that class that had all been winning shows, so he won the class and then he was reserve senior champion. Yeah. Never used a show stick on him.
No. And, now to this, now he's bred cows and been super gentle. You can go up to him in the pasture, but just something about that day, he was not having it.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. Well, kind of wrapping up we've talked about, your background. We've talked about some of our animals. I want to talk a minute about kind of the mental aspect of, being a herdsman, working in this industry. As a herdsman, you manage a lot of cattle, but you also manage a lot of people, especially at shows. And the atmosphere that you have created at BRC, especially on our show team, is just 100% positive. I feel like, when you're part of that team and you're around it, it's just like there's like a glow of happiness, not to sound cheesy, but just a good vibe coming off of the BRC show team. And that starts with you and the tone that you set and the attitude that you have. And so tell us about just maybe, your thoughts on our team or how you manage your employees at the show, any just, expectations or rules that you have on the show string, just how you work that vibe.
I have very high expectations, not just from the people that I work with, but I'm also extremely tough on myself. Looking back at, say, the first Houston or I think it's second national show and all of that compared to this past national show, a little of me is ashamed of the way, maybe I talked to some people back then and like looking now, it's kind of like I've grown, I've matured a whole lot. And I have, I was young back then. I'm still fairly young now. And so I'm still learning a lot. And, I'm glad to, I guess, finally see and have other people see that I do try to create a positive atmosphere. And, I can't always take credit on the atmosphere. Just that team that we have, now with us is so good. It's almost hard not to have a good, attitude and influence. And so I won't take credit for, all of that by any means. This year at Nationals, it was, female and bull day, and the way they had the show set up from the time the gray females and the gray bulls started, I never went back to the beds. Mm-hmm. And we didn't miss a single class. Every single one of the cattle was full. And so, that right there is just hats off to everybody, from Lynn to Keaton to Ty to, Luis, even though he's up at the feedlots now, to Weston Hendricks, who was working with us at that week, and, a few of those able kids, program kids that were helping us out. They were fantastic. And that, it's having people around like that who don't necessarily always get the credit that are probably the ones that should. They were, WT Calk, he was up there. Case Boccia and Michael Boccia, everybody that has a hand in it, just, incredible for our team. And they really do, they make the job easy. And, they might not always get the recognition in the photos or in the magazines or on the Facebook post or whatever it is. And, I try to say, hey, thank y'all and all that. But those guys right there, top of the notch, they're what makes working at the shows so fun and enjoyable. And you're going to have a good week when Lynn Castaneda sitting there listening to Bad Bunny at 3 a.m. and you're just like, dude, this is not the time. And he's just listening to Spanish music. And it's a really good.
Do y'all have do you have any like show day rituals or anything like that you like to do to get pumped up?
I I mean, I don't know if we have any rituals. We always do a big team prayer before the show starts, and I'd probably say that's our biggest thing. But as far as rituals go, I don't think so. We introduced the panini press at this national show, and that was a really big thing because I can't eat a sandwich cold. Apparently, is what Lynn says. So
So
I had a little panini press.
I should share with our listeners that, of course, me with our spreadsheets, I have a spreadsheet for each show with our expenses of each show, and then I break it down for each day and each meal what our meal expenses are. And I think that you and April got together and y'all calculated that if you were to purchase the panini press and eat sandwiches at the show, you could save like this huge amount of money in the long run. Right?
Yeah, so I had talked to April and I was like, "Hey, I've got a panini press, and if anybody that is listening was at my wedding, you would have heard Lynn talk about this very same panini press in his best man speech because he would leave it out on the counter every day, and my wife hated that thing. And so I brought this panini press to nationals, and April brought like 6 loaves of bread and all of this meat and all of that, and it would be 4 a.m. after getting off the wash rack, and I'm over here making a fried bologna sandwich on this little panini press, and it was a fun little thing that we did. And then we brought a little coffee pot this year, but the panini press was definitely like a little mood lifter at 4 a.m. when everybody's tired and dragging a little bit, and then I'm just over here plugging the panini press in, and they're like, "Really? You can't just eat the sandwich cold?" And I'm like, "No, I as a matter of fact, I can't."
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. So how do you feel about like cell phone use on the show stream? You allow people to be like texting or playing on their phone on show day?
On show day, as long as things are getting done, and like this past year, they had to have been getting done because the cattle looked great. We didn't miss a single class. And so, I'm not too frugal on it. Now, if there's something big going on or going down and somebody's on their phones, then, I might snap a little bit. But for the most part, I like to think I'm semi-lenient.
So don't give any names here, but hypothetically, if you had a team member that was late getting to the barn, how would you respond to that at shows? Late getting to the barn on shows?
Well, this one particular member actually got it pretty easy because he did call me as he was headed to the barn about 30 minutes late and explained his situation. And so part of me felt a little bad and all of that. So the person he was staying with had to leave and go to the hospital. Well, he couldn't get in touch with me. And so he drove all the way from College Station to Brenham to stay with some friends at Blinn, and then had to drive back. And I actually was talking to that particular person today and was giving him some mess about it because I had asked him if he was coming down for Houston, and he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, guess what? You're staying with us and you're not going to be late this time." He was like, "All right, sounds good." I mean,
we've all been there. We've all done it, No, you're.
Oh, yeah.
I think that, we didn't really talk a lot about your involvement in sports as a young man, but you were very involved in sports, and you're still a huge sports fan, and I feel like people who are sports oriented like that tend to excel as a herdsman and a leader, because so much of that from the sports world carries over into the, even into show cattle.
Oh yeah.
So now are you a Nick Saban fan?
No. Not necessarily.
Oh, okay.
That's not because of Nick Saban himself. That's more of just for the fact that I'm a University of Florida guy. Alabama's another SEC team, and I don't really care for Alabama. So that's kind of where that came in. I didn't mean to answer so fast, but yeah. No, I think as him as a coach, I think he is tremendous, to be able to build a dynasty that has been as successful and powerful as Alabama and football has been over the last 15 years is extremely impressive. And there's a lot to respect from that. But as a former student of University of Florida, I'm not a huge Nick Saban fan. And, I didn't play sports at a level, Colton Thigpen did. Or, I think I only played sports till I was about a freshman then in high school. But it does give you a competitiveness, and I always like to, try and be the best at everything I do. And so when I kind of moved to Florida, got to a bigger school, and that was kind of the deciding factor on me switching from playing sports to moving into the cattle and agriculture industry. Was I looked at myself in the mirror and said, my chances of being a professional in sports is slim. My chance of doing something in agriculture and the cattle industry is much higher. And so that was kind of the ultimate factor of what made me kind of choose a way in what I put most of my attention in.
Yeah, I think you should share with the listeners what you told me yesterday about what you want to install above the wash rack.
Oh, yeah. So for those that don't know, I am a huge baseball fan. Particularly, I am a huge Tampa Bay Rays fan. And Brandon almost fired me one day back when Sweetie was having her first calf after she had won Houston. And there was like 6 or 7 guys around. And I was like, it's opening day of baseball season. Or no, it was one of the first weeks of baseball season. And I like snuck out of the barn to go home and watch baseball. And that was the day that Brandon almost fired me. But anyways, I was talking to Miss Rachel about possibly installing, me buying a TV and installing it above the wash rack. That way I no longer have to miss noon games.
And I think it's genius.
Yeah. And I mean, who knows? This could be I could invest $200 in this, and it could end up being like a $6,000 investment for Brandon and Rachel, because I'm going to be staying there till 7, 8 o'clock at night watching baseball, and I could be washing cows. You never know. But Brandon said he's fine with the idea as long as I am paying for the TV, which I assured him that I was.
Well, last night, Molly was very excited about it. That's all she was talking about at the house, is that how you were going to put a TV above the wash rack. I think it's a hit.
Oh, I think it will be too. I think it will be too, especially once we get into more of a sports season. I know football's kind of winding down at this point, but.
Yes. So when we wrap up the podcast, we like to ask everybody what if they have to name who is their all-time favorite Brahman animal. And so I'll definitely put that one out there. But if you kind of already answered it, or if you don't, I'll give you an alternative question, which is, what is your all-time favorite show supply product? And you can answer both.
Well, I kind of answered it already with 835 Lupita, but I'm actually going to go back one generation and say 341, because 341's got one, like, Big Mamu on the show string right now. Like, she's just really impressive. And then you go to look down, there wouldn't be an 835 without a 341. So I'll probably say 341 there. And then favorite show supply, you got to go the rice root brush. You got to. It's just
that is such a Brahman herdsman answer. That's the perfect Brahman herdsman answer.
Oh yeah, you got to go with the rice root brush.
Yeah. Well, just kind of wrapping up. Is there anything we missed or anything you want to share that we didn't talk about?
I don't think so. I think we covered it all. I think this was a really good session.
Mice in the feed room.
Oh.
We did not talk about that.
No, we did not talk about that.
It's like we have our own little pet mouse.
Yeah, it's impressive. We should probably call like Petco or something and see if they need any inventory to feed their snakes.
We have so many.
Because we could supply. And we used to get sticky traps, but one of them got big enough to carry them away. So those don't work anymore.
It's great. Oh gosh. Well, Harley, obviously every day working with you is a joy, but this podcast has been so good, and I know our listeners are definitely going to enjoy it. Just hearing the story and hearing the day-to-day, what it takes, to be one of the greatest Brahman herdsmen of all time. How about that? Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I'm quite that high up yet, but that's eventually the goal, I suppose, is, to be the best.
Yeah.
But I've really enjoyed getting on here and talking and sharing a little bit of my story and, work ethic and talk about the great people I get to work with.
Yeah. So maybe just wrap up and share, if anybody if you ever want to reach out to Harley for advice or, just questions, he's always available. You want to share how you prefer people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, phone number is definitely the best way, either through calling, and if I don't answer, just a quick text message, and sometimes I get back. I'm not a huge phone guy. I am not technologically advanced at all. But yeah, just phone number 901-218-5939, and any questions about halter breaking, feeding, those are the things I can probably help answer with the most confidence. Genetic wise, Keaton and Brandon probably have a foot up on me there, but I can answer some pretty simple questions that way. But, still going out and learning every day is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's been great. And we hope everybody enjoyed it. Enjoyed this episode of Over the Hump. Hey guys, we hope that you're enjoying the Over the Hump podcast. We've had so many great reviews and great feedback from this podcast, and we've had several people asking how they can support it. So we are proud to announce that we've created the Over the Hump fan club, where you can join and sign up on a yearly basis to help support this podcast and get some really cool merch as well. We have 3 different levels ranging from $40 a year to $250 a year. And at each level, you get some really cool different benefits and different free gifts. For example, at our Trailblazer level, you get a free copy of my really awesome Modern Brahman coffee table book, which is a 160-page coffee table book featuring the gorgeous photography of Carlos Guizora from Mexico, along with Brahman history written by me. And then our Supreme Stockman level, which is $250 a year, includes that plus free access to the Brahman Academy for 1 year. And at our Trailblazer and Supreme Stockman levels, you also get a discount to use in the BRC online store, which you can use for anything that's in the store, including semen, AI certificates, show cattle camp, event registrations, and more. So this is a really great opportunity, especially if you purchase a lot of semen or AI certificates from us. You can join the fan club and get some great discounts to use throughout the whole year. So if you like this podcast and want to help support it, you can sign up for the Over the Hump fan club at shopbrcutrer.com. That's shopbrcutrer.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you are enjoying it.
You've been listening to the Over the Hump podcast. Our passion is Brahman cattle, and it runs deep. And this show is about its rich history, industry trends, and stories that define the American Brahman. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram and Facebook at BR Cutrer. See you next time on the Over the Hump podcast.